This video will teach you how to do a true fly zipper, and we will be doing the right over left zipper. So let's look at the parts that you need. You need to cut 2 of your front little pattern piece and transfer your markings. You will need the fly facing and the fly guard. Cut 2 of this one of this one, and the one for the fly facing needs to be cut with the fabric right side up. This one, it'll be a mirror image. And it would also be good to have your fly zipper instructions for women that's in your packet, and that's 2 pages. You'll also need a 7-inch zipper. And now let's look at the parts of the fly zipper. It's really the most common zipper in ready-to-wear jeans and pants. It's very strong. We've got top stitching here. We've got 2 bar tacks. We have a fly facing that's a separate piece that gets sewn on. We have an underlap. And underneath it all, we have another piece called the fly guard or the fly shield. So there are quite a few parts to this. So let's get started with the 2 front pieces. After you've transferred your markings, you may want to transfer this marking, or you can wait, and I'll show you some tips on how to transfer that stitching marking. We've marked on the wrong side this top circle and the bottom circle, and the other thing that I have done is finish off the raw edges, and I did it with the overlock stitch using the overlock foot. I also did it on the fly facing piece. So that's ready to go. Now we're going to take our 2 pant front pieces and put them right sides together. And we're going to pin them together. These circle markings are going to show us where we're going to stitch. From this circle marking to this circle marking. We are going to back stitch up to this marking and then stitch down to this one. We don't have to back stitch here. Eventually you will finish the crotch seam. Okay, we're ready to take this to the sewing machine. We'll start stitching a 1/2 inch down from that top circle, so we can back stitch up to the middle of that mark, and then stitch down to the bottom mark. Keep it on the 5/8. And here you do not need to back stitch, because eventually you would be finishing your crotch seam. So go ahead and clip your thread tails. And now we're ready to add that facing piece. So we'll come back to the table. And we're going to open this up. Notice that I have 2 different sizes of polka dots here. So the larger polka dots is the right front, the smaller polka dots is the left front. And since we're doing a right over left fly zipper, we needed our facing piece to be cut out like this. And it's going to be put right side down to the right pant leg. So right side to right side. We're matching up this raw edge. Now, I actually don't put my pins on this side. I'm actually going to put them on this side. So I'm going to now flip it and put my pins in. Because I like to stitch on this side, because we want to come and stitch close to, but not through, this stitching in, and we want these to line up exactly. So we'll put this under the machine. And now I'll be using the left side of the stitch plate for my 5/8 guide. We will back stitch up to the top. I'm on the 5/8 line here on the left. Now we'll stitch straight down to our previous stitching. Take your time as you get close to that. This will help you be more accurate since we're on the same side. And it's better to have one less stitch than to go too far. Okay, I'm there. I'm going to back stitch. And we'll cut our thread tails. Now that our facing is on, we are going to press it and also grade that seam allowance. So we'll take it back to the iron. We're pressing the seam allowance towards the facing. And then we're going to trim and grade. So you have to think of that phrase, widest to the world. Here's the world side. So it's the pink one, or the seam allowance that's on the pant one, that will be the longest one. So I'm going to go ahead and trim them both down a 1/4 inch off. And then we'll trim the facing another 1/8 inch. And that one I'm going to take all the way off since that's the facing. But for the pant one, I'm going to trim that back to the seam allowance. Now we'll take that back to the machine and we will understitch close to this facing edge. Back stitch. Just take it down to your circle and backstitch. Okay, we're going to go back to the counter again to place our zipper down. Our facing is right side up and our zipper tape is right side down with the slider towards the top. We're going to put a little pin mark a 1/4 inch above where our circle marking is and where our stitching ended. And the bottom stop is going to match up to that pin mark because we want the bottom stop a 1/4 inch above where our seam ended. Now we'll go ahead and flip up the zipper tape tail of the one that's closest to the pant, and we're going to pin through there. Then we'll put another pin up here. That's just holding it in place, and we are going to hand baste this side of the zipper tape. Hand basting will be more secure than pin basting. And I don't make a knot in my basting because I'm going to be pulling this out in a little bit. So you can do a running stitch. Have that go a little faster. When you get close to the little tail here that we have folded up, you're going to do some smaller stitches there because you don't want that to come out. You could even do a knot if you want to. I just want to keep that tail up. That's very important for when we do our top stitching. Okay, these pins can come out now. We'll cut our thread. And what we're going to do now is 2 rows of stitching on this other zipper tape. We'll do one in the middle, and then we'll do one close to the outside edge. So you will need to get your zipper foot out. It's the number 4 on the Bernina, and we'll set that up. Anytime we use the zipper foot, we have to move the needle to the far right or to the far left. Now on most of the application of this zipper, we will be stitching from the bottom to the top. And so I'm going to be stitching this direction. I want my needle to the far right to start out with. And you can do just a couple of back stitches if you'd like to. Notice the left edge of my zipper foot is lining up with the zipper tape. Now, I didn't mention this before, but you can use zippers that are longer than what your pants are, and it's okay that the rest of the zipper is up here. It can be cut off after the waistband is put on. So we're going to go to the top of the fabric and backstitch. Then we're going to do one more row of stitching, and I'm going to move the needle to the far left so that I can stitch closer to the edge of the tape. We'll go ahead and do a few back stitches. Get that thread out of the way. It's nice that these stitches are not seen on the right side of the fly zipper. Go ahead and clip all your thread tails. Okay, that makes for a very secure zipper. Now we're ready to take it back over to the table. There are different ways that we could have marked our stitching here. There was marking on your pattern piece, so you could have marked it then, or you could measure over 1.25 inches and make a mark. We just need to make sure that once we flip the facing under, when we do our top stitching here, it catches the fly facing. So you notice I could go clear out here if I wanted to, but I went ahead and made a template from the pattern, and so I'm going to place that here just along the seam line. It's about 1.25 inches, and I want the bottom of the template to come right to where my seam ended, right here in the middle of the circle, and I'm going to make my stitching line. We will mark the outside edge of that template. That will be our stitching line. Okay, there's our stitching line. That will be nice and accurate and even width all the way down. Now we're ready to fold this back, and we don't want any of the facing to show on the right side, but you don't want a big lip of your pant fabric there either. So barely have that rolled under, and then we'll put some pins in. You're pinning through the facing and the pant, but not necessarily through the zipper tape, because the zipper tape ends right here. Now, to be accurate, we're going to go ahead and hand baste this through the facing and the pants. Now, we don't want to stitch right on that mark because we want to be able to pull out our basting easily. So I'm going to be just slightly to the outside of that mark. So remember, you are not stitching through the zipper tape. And I'm not going to tie a knot there. Okay, just double check that, make sure everything is smooth before we do our top stitching. We stitched from the bottom to the top, so we're going to do that same direction here with this top stitching. Double check to make sure that your bottom stop is out of the way of your stitching. You don't want that in the way or you will break your needle. So there's my bottom stop. I'm good to go. The other fabric is out of the way. Our zipper tape is out of the way there. We want our needle to the far left, and you can decide whether to backstitch or not. Usually on top stitching zippers, I don't backstitch, I pull my threads to the back, but knowing that we are going to bar tack right here, we could either just leave it, we could do backstitching, or we could tie a knot. I'm going to actually do the securing knot because this Bernina happens to have that feature. So I pushed that. It did just a few stitches. Okay, so be very careful as you go around the curve. You want this to look really nice. I'm going to have to adjust my fabric just a little bit. Notice I'm stopping, kind of adjusting my fabric around this curve part. And once I get to the straight part, I'm going to actually put my presser foot up to the edge of the blue. Go ahead and back stitch. Okay, the top part of the fly zipper is finished. We're ready to prepare the fly guard, and you'll have two mirrored image pieces cut out. This is also sometimes called the fly shield, the underlap. They all mean the same thing. It's that protective layer between the pants zipper and the body. So you're going to put them right sides together. We're going to pin on the curved part because we're going to sew a 5/8 seam along this straight side and the curved part. The needle goes back to the center position, the regular foot, back stitch, and back stitch. We're going to trim quite a bit off here. We're going to trim and grade actually, but I always trim first. So we're going to trim 3/8 off and leave 1/4 inch on. This fabric's not very bulky, but maybe your pant fabric is. So now we're going to take that top layer and trim another 1/8 inch off of that one. There are lots of different kinds of patterns for the fly guard. This is just one example. Now, that is a convex curve. We could notch it, but this is all I'm going to do. We're just going to do some little pinking notches right there, and that will help take care of some of that bulk. Now we're going to take it to the iron. We could go ahead and turn it right side out. What I'm going to do is actually kind of open up the seam like this. This saves me a little time. Then we'll go ahead and turn it right side out and get it nicely pressed without any little fabric tucks or kissy lips. Okay, that looks nice and smooth, flat. Now we need to finish off this raw edge. Looks like we've got a little turn of cloth going on, so let me see if I can get that straightened up. This could be serged, but for time's sake, we will do the overlock stitch on it like we did for the other pieces. That is stitch number 3 and presser foot number 2. We will not be overlocking across the top, and that's because that raw edge will eventually be enclosed in the waistband. Okay, so now that fly guard is prepared, and we are going to set that aside. We're ready for the underlap, so we'll go back to the counter. We want to unpick our basting stitches. I didn't do a knot, so that makes it easier to start taking that out. Did its job. And I should be able to just pull the rest. Now, I like to place this wrong side up to make sure I get an accurate underlap. Here's our left pant front. We're going to fold it under about a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to place my zipper tape on top of it. Now, this won't be my permanent pinning, but this will help me be more accurate if I start by pinning it on the wrong side here. Don't go through all your layers because you need to get to the opposite side. So now we flip it over and we're just checking it. Did it underlap? Yes, that's nice. We want to have that folded fabric close to the coil. We don't want to have any bubbling going on down here. And this is where it'll happen if you don't have your fabric positioned correctly. I need to transfer my pins. So I'm kind of holding on to my fabric while I pull those pins out so I can transfer them to this side. The underlap has been pressed under a 1/4 inch and then placed next to the coil of the zipper. I'm going to double check down here to make sure it did stay folded. And no bubbling. We want that nice and smooth. Okay, that looks good. Go ahead and pin that last one. I just want to make sure that the raw edges don't flip, and they did not. So I'm going to temporarily, well, I could pin that back, or I could go ahead and unzip it. So maybe that's what I'll do. I'll just unzip that. Get my basting thread again. And we are going to hand baste the fabric to the zipper tape. Hand basting is your friend. Really helps keep your layers from shifting on you when you sew on the machine. Okay, my slider's kind of in the way now, so I'm going to zip that closed a little bit. Try to get in here just a couple of more stitches. Now, after I cut my thread, I'm going to double check again that everything is smooth, because things could have shifted, and we want to make sure I have no bubble down here at all. So we'll zip that all the way closed to just make sure, yes, everything looks really smooth. So we're ready now to add the fly guard, and it goes underneath. We don't want to do one row of top stitching and then have to do it again with the guard, so that's why we have hand basted the underlap to the zipper, and now we're ready to place this underneath. Go ahead and flip it over again. I like to have my curved area be the same here. We're going to bring our raw edges up to the top here. You want to make sure that your guard is a little bit lower than your zipper bottom stop, and that it lines up to your top stitching, which is about right here, because we want the bar tack to catch that layer. So if needs be, lower it a little bit, and it's okay that it doesn't meet up here. But we do want it to meet over here, so we put it on the edge of the zipper tape. And I'm going to pin that on. This is temporary because we're going to flip it to the other side. This will help make sure that we're below the bottom stop. We're lining it straight here. Everything looks nice and neat. Okay, we'll flip it over and repin on this side, because this is the side we will be stitching on. But keep the upper fly part out of the way. Just need to pin through the underlap and the guard. Okay, we'll take these pins out. And let's just check that. Okay, everything looks smooth. Okay, things look really good. Now, because my zipper is longer, I do not have to move that slider down. I can just be stitching here. And here's where we do break our rule and we stitch from the top down. And that's because we need to allow that presser foot to go all down as far as we can. And if we started from the bottom up, we wouldn't be able to get down there as far. Now, the instructions say to hand baste again. So you could choose to hand baste, or you could leave those pins in there and go ahead and edge stitch. We'll put the zipper foot back on. It's the number 4. And we are going to put our needle to the far left. We want to edge stitch, so I'm putting the left edge of the zipper presser foot on the edge of the folded fabric. I start down about 1/4 inch, and I'm going to back stitch to the top. And then stitch down, and just take your time. You want this edge stitching to look really nice. It's sewing through quite a few layers. if you feel like your fabric is moving on you, you can kind of manipulate that and kind of pull back on it, because you don't want to create a bubble down at the bottom. Now, when you get close to the bottom, it makes it a little harder to get up into this little area. So you can try to unzip it, but you'll find sometimes that doesn't help you because the slider is in the way. So you have to see what works best for you. I'm just going to show you what that looks like. I think that just gets in my way, so I'm actually not going to do that. But I want to get the fly out of the way, so I kind of use this seam ripper as a stylus to help guide the fabric. And you don't have to get down all the way, so don't feel like you have to stitch down, but it looks like I'm able to get down to the bottom stop. And then I could do back stitching. I could even pull my threads to the back and tie a knot, or I could do the anchor stitch. Just get those threads secure. And then pull out your, or cut your threads. Okay, and before we pull out our basting, let's just look at that edge stitching. Of course, yours will be matching threads, so it'll look a little nicer. Make sure that things are still nice and smooth here. And then you can take out this basting. We have one more step to do, and that is bar tacking. The zipper becomes a stress area for when we're putting on the pants. Right in this area, and we don't want to have stress on the zipper. So by putting 2 bar tacks on, that takes the stress off the actual zipper. We're going to put one right here at the bottom, and we'll put one right here at the curve. So we want to have our zipper closed. We want to have things underneath here smooth, and we'll get our machine ready to go. We use the regular presser foot, and we use the zigzag. So we'll show you the settings for that. You want to be on number 2 zigzag stitch, but we're going to change our stitch width to 1.5 width. And we're going to have our stitch length to 0.5. And we don't want to make our bar tacks very long. We only want them to be about 1/4 inch in length. So it would be best if you did a little test sample of that first. Another thing that's very nice for that bar tack is if you thread the finger of the bobbin case, just like you would for buttonholes. It makes it a much nicer satin stitch. So we'll bring our bobbin thread back up through the top. Let's go ahead and do the curved one, or the curved area first, just right here in the curve, making sure it's going to catch your guard. Don't make it too long, just about 1/4 inch in length. I counted 18 stitches, and I think that's good enough, so we will cut our thread tails on that one. Now, on this, since we didn't back stitch, I don't actually cut my thread tails short. I like to leave them long, and I'll come back later and I'll pull on my bobbin thread and get my needle thread to come through to the other side. And if they won't pull through, then just get a hand needle, thread these tails, and poke your needle down through there and pull them to the back, rather than have little stubby thread tails there on the right side. Now we're ready to do this bottom one. We're going to start right on the seam here, and I'm going to put a pin 1/4 inch in from the edge so I know when to stop. Or I could go ahead and count again, about 18 single stitches. I don't like starting on the left pant leg. I like to start right on the seam. 17, 18, 19, maybe 20 on that one. And once again, I am going to leave longer thread tails, and then you could pull those threads to the back or use a hand needle, poke them through to the back. And then you could go ahead and take out your basting here on the top stitching area. Here is the finished fly zipper sample, and when you do your sample, let's go ahead and leave your basting there.